The science nerds of the world have done studies that have proven that you are either good at bench press or you're good at talking to women. Hi, I'm Patrick, and pretty women scare me, but I've benched over 600 pounds multiple times in competition. So let's gather around today and talk about the bench press. The bench press is a lot like ice cream. You can have the vanilla bench press, or you can kind of adjust things on the bench press and give yourself a chocolate bench press, mint chip bench press, or like a rum raisin bench press. And no, rum raisin isn't bad. It's not for old people. It's actually really delicious. And there are different strokes for different folks, meaning different people have different struggles that they have on the bench press. And I'm going to talk about my 3 favorite ways to do a bench press that isn't the kosher vanilla dill pickle version of the bench press. And what I'm talking about are what's called a mechanically similar movement, an MSM, if you will. A lot of powerlifting programs out there, like Fifth Set, which I ran for 7 years, will utilize this concept of a mechanically similar movement to practice the bench press without overloading the bench press or fatiguing yourself out too much during the bench press. However, according to Fifth Set guidelines, a mechanically similar movement will be the same movement, but with a reduced range of motion. And we're going to tweak that a little bit. A more modern definition of a mechanically similar movement is a movement that is mechanically similar to the one that you want to be practicing. Oh my goodness, that is mind-blowing and whoa. But what I'm talking about is if you have stability issues on the bench press, you want to target your stability issues on the bench press with a mechanically similar movement. If you have explosiveness issues where you're not really explosive off the chest and you kind of just can't really get it up, you need to work on that. And we're going to use a mechanically similar movement to fix that. And if you just struggle to put out a decent bench press, you get overly fatigued, you're too slow, you're not really controlled or anything, you best believe there's a mechanically similar movement out there for that. So today, I'm going to give you, as a 600-pound bencher, my 3 favorite mechanically similar movements for the bench press. Now, these are just my list. There's other lists that other people have out there that is their personal favorites, but this is what I prefer to use in order to get a bench bigger than all of those people. The first mechanically similar movement that we're going to be talking about today is my personal favorite, and some people have attributed it to myself. I call it the pulse press. Other people have called it the McGuire press, and I've seen it as the piston press as well. But the basics of it is a short range of motion, and we're working on the explosiveness off the chest. So I'm going to give you a little demo as to what it looks like, and then we're going to explain why it's important and how to utilize it in your own programming. The range of motion goal of this movement is the bottom third of the bench press. So you might get a little bit of weird looks from people in your gym calling you a cheater, but you bench more than them if you're going to be using this. So it's not just we're working on the bottom third of the bench. According to physics, there's concepts called projectiles in motion. When you launch a rocket, and just ignore the physics and everything of thrust, if you throw an object, you toss it up, it continues to rise even after you're done touching it with your hand. A rocket continues to rise after the initial launch. Just ignore the physics of rockets for a bit there. But what we want to be doing in this exercise is to put the projectile in motion, but never have it leave our hands. So we're benching the bottom third of the bench, but we want enough momentum off the chest that we can almost fly it to lockout. But we're only working the bottom third, so we're going to stop it. And the plates, I have plates on this. I don't normally do demos with plates, but I want you guys to be able to hear what it sounds like to perform this exercise, because it's actually important. The stoppage of the weight at the top to bring it back down is important. It's almost like the crux of this exercise, making it not like a bottom third bench press where you can just go and bench the bottom third of your bench. This is an explosive movement where you're working on the explosiveness off your chest. It is a touch and go movement, so it's not replicating competition standards of a pause off the chest. I mean, you can do that. I personally haven't, but that might be something that's been missing in my programming. And you could push and pull the variables on this exercise to suit your needs a little bit better. But this is the bread and butter version of how to do the pulse press. So what you want to do is you want to set up as if you're doing a regular bench press. So you want to set your arch, set your feet, set your lats, and unrack the bar. And we're going to work the bottom third, and we're going to stop it as it's going up because we want to be explosive off the chest. So if you were listening, you could have heard on each of those 25 reps at 135 with no warm-up. Let me flex on you, host, a little bit. We pressed it up and we stopped it while it was in motion, and you heard the jingle of the weights. Around Christmas time, see the Christmas shirt? It's like jingle the bells. You want to be jingling the plates at lockout. So you want to stop it when you're about a third off your chest, bring it back down and pulse it out. What this does is it's let me explain it to you when I'm walking around and not out of breath. So what this mechanically similar movement does is it does two things. It works on your hypoxic response because you feel the burn and you get more in tune with where your body's going to be at when it's close to failure. Because you pulse it, you pulse it, you pulse it, you feel the burn, and you teach your body, hey, I feel this burn, you're lacking oxygen, so let me just push through that. It's teaching that testicular fortitude that it's going to require to push through difficult things because you're repping it out. It also works on the explosiveness off the chest. That's the no-brainer part of it, is you're doing a lot of reps off the chest. Explosive, explosive, explosive. So you're practicing that. You're building up muscle memory for that. And also, the third little tidbit that this one mechanically similar movement, we're feeding so many birds with these scones right here. This one scone, it's like a Jesus scone. You got one scone feeding 3 birds. Gee willikers. So the third thing what it does is it teaches you to be strict with your touch position. Because a lot of times what happens when you're performing the pulse press is you start in a good touch position and then it rides up and it gets very nippular. That is a new word that I developed right now to explain that it gets closer and closer to your nipples, which is not a good spot to have your bar go into because that flares your elbows, develops negative muscle memory, and it also targets different muscles and not necessarily the better muscles or the muscles that you want to be using for the bench press in this accessory movement. So kind of like how there's non-Euclidean objects in the universe, like you can make squares out of triangles on the North Pole of Earth. This is a non-prolepinular. This movement doesn't really follow the Prolepin's chart because it can't really follow the Prolepin's chart. What you can rep out on a pulse press isn't 1-to-1 what you can rep out on a regular bench. And it's not 3-to-1 what you can rep out on a regular bench. It's somewhere in between, and it's an individual basis. So how do you use this accessory movement, this mechanically similar movement, in your own training? So what you want to do is you want to do it right after your main work. So let's say you have a 4x3 at 75% with 2 minutes rest. You want it to be the 5th set of that. See what I did there? Because the way that this worked optimally was within the 5th set training program, and we're trying to branch out from that. So whatever set number is your last set with your main movement, so you could do a 3x3 at 80%, you could do a 6x2 at 60%, something like that. Something that follows the Prolepin's chart to a degree, spookily close to the Prolepin's chart. Something like that. You want your pulse presses to follow that. And how much do you load on it? you leave the bar the same. And what you do is you take it for what's called an AMRAP, as many reps as possible. But that's a misnomer. AMRAP should really be AMGRAP, but AMGRAP isn't as sexy as AMRAP, so we just say AMRAP because only the G's understand. So what you want to do is you want to do your main work, then throw in the pulse press immediately afterwards with the same weights, not to failure, but within 1 rep shy of failure. And you're going to get really good at understanding and control and communicating with your body and understand that communication, that mind-muscle connection as to where your failure point is. When you're first starting out, you're going to want a spotter because you're not going to understand your body's limitations as well. And you're probably going to push a little too far. Something I noticed when I was programming, men push too far, women cut themselves off early. Don't. But as you get more inclined to the communication with your body, you're going to learn a little bit better as to what you should be doing, where your failure points are, what it feels like to be within 1 rep of failure. You're going to understand, and you can do it a little more proactively and more individually. Because, I don't have enough friends to spot me, so I had to learn that. The second mechanically similar movement that we're going to be talking about today is known as the Larsen press. It is also known as no legs bench, but that's only for people who aren't part of powerlifting, who aren't part of powerlifting programming, and they're kind of making up the names as they go. And we appreciate you for being a part of the community. But it's called a Larsen press. Now, how you perform the Larsen press is almost an individual kind of thing because it's all based on what makes you feel comfortable, but there are some rules of thumb in it. And there are some incorrect ways in performing the Larsen press. So the goal of the Larsen press is to get rid of the legs out of the movement because the legs are a very important part of the bench press. And that being said, what a lot of people will do when they're doing the Larsen press is they'll take their legs out of the bench and they won't set anything else in their upper back. They won't set their lats, they won't set their arch because who needs an arch when you don't have legs? It's still important. So, how you do the Larsen press. You set up as if you're doing a regular bench press, hence a mechanically similar movement. You set your arch, you set your lats, and you can set your feet. But the most important thing is you've set your lats and you've set your arch. And then there's 2 ways that you can go about getting rid of your feet. There's a standard way where you kind of just let your legs fly out here. But if you do it like this, you want glute flexion. If you can notice, I'm flexing my glutes, and quad flexion so that you still have the lower body initiation, lower body inclusion of the movement, but you don't want to be bracing off the floor. So, form the Larsen press. You just perform a regular bench press with no legs. Additionally, there's a second way that a lot of people will do it, but it kind of gets rid of your arch. It's not necessarily incorrect, but it kind of focuses more on the core muscles and the stabilizers in the core than the other way of doing the Larsen press. So you set up for a regular bench, and you bring your legs up here, and you crunch your core, and you feel that core engagement while you're performing the Larsen press. If you noticed, with my legs up, my core engaged, my touch position was different than if I was just out here with my arch set, my legs up, my touch position is much higher, and it simulates what I do when I'm doing a regular bench press a little bit better. So the goal of the Larsen press is to activate your stabilizers, the smaller muscles that are used while you're performing the bench press that don't necessarily get super stressed out or super activated when you're doing the regular bench press. But if they are not keeping up with the rest of your bench, you risk injury. So you want these stabilizers, these small muscle groups, such as the pec minor, the rotator cuffs, if you the shoulders, the different minor bicep, minor tricep, the different muscle fibers that are in your body that are there to stabilize, as well as your core, your obliques, your lats, the smaller muscles in there that are trickled in that really only a biology or a doctor would be able to, biology major or a doctor would be able to like tell people the names of, because let's be honest, us normal people don't care, but they're there, and the Larson press targets them. So how do you program Larson presses into your powerlifting program? Well, it's on a bench day, obviously. There's kind of two ways to go about it. You can replace your main bench movement for a whole block or an extended block to work on those smaller stabilizer muscles and work them to be stronger, so that when you do add the legs back in, when you do add leg drive, all of those cues back in, that you'll be able to rely on your stabilizers a little bit better because they're stronger and they can take heavier loads and they can stabilize things a little bit better because you've gone through a little bit of hypertrophy with them. That being said, you don't want to do this if you have bad bench form. You don't want to replace your main bench movement because you want to be practicing the bench in order to get good bench form. So when you're replacing your main movement with a Larson press, what you want to do is you want to keep it within the hypertrophic range. So the hypertrophic rep range, according to bodybuilding and all the science nerds have figured out, is somewhere between 8 reps and it can be upwards of 20 reps, but I'd rather masturbate with sandpaper than do that. So 8 reps to 15 reps, maybe 6 reps, and that's getting a little bit into the hyperplasia. And if you've developed the hypertrophy of those muscles well enough, you're going to want to drift down into that hyperplasia kind of area of muscle development, which hyperplasia is the powerlifting equivalent of hypertrophy. Hypertrophy makes your muscles bigger. Hyperplasia makes your muscles denser and stronger. So you build up the size with hypertrophy, and then you make it dense. You compress it with hyperplasia. So it's almost like a block where you'll do 4 weeks within the hyperplasia, 8 to 12 reps, 8 to 15 technically, but 8 to 12 if you're a normal person. 4 weeks of that, and then you kind of inch back. Next block, maybe you're doing 6 reps. And then you keep it between 5 and 6, maybe 4 and 6 reps of the hyperplasia Larson presses, and then you go back into the full bench press. The other way that you can utilize the Larson presses in your own programming is as an accessory movement. You're not replacing your main movement. So if you don't have good bench form, this is how you would go about it. You've got your main movement, whatever schema you're using, whether it's 5-3-1 or 5th set or there's not something following the Prolepin chart would be a better nomer, because I mean that the Prolepin's chart is almost like the Bible for powerlifting programming, weightlifting programming in general. So you've got your main movement set out with the Prolepin's chart, and then you use this as an accessory movement. And what you want to do is build up that hypertrophy. You want to build up the size of these stabilizer muscles so that they can get recruited when you're doing the regular bench press. So something like 4x8 or 3x12 is generally what I program my own clients when I am programming them Larson presses, because it builds up that hypertrophy so that later on, when they're practicing their good form, they're going to feel those activated muscles, those built up muscles over time, and they'll be better at benching. Their bench will be a little more stable. And now for a brief word from our sponsor of today's video. Hi, I'm Patrick, and you motherfuckers thought I'd actually get a sponsor for this video? Huh? No. Look at me. Who would do that? So I'm sponsoring my own video, and I'm poor as shit. So I have a Printify store. Yay. Links in the description. That's the word I was looking for. Link for the Printify store in the description. We've got shirts like dots. Shirts like is my control. The tism is chronic, but the total is iconic. And we have a plethora of apparel for women as well. Pay me. The last mechanically similar movement that we're going to be talking about today is a little bit of masochism. It's something that you use to kind of make lighter weights feel heavy. The mechanically similar movement, this third mechanically similar movement, technically is mechanically similar, but it's also exactly the same as a regular bench press, but it does different things than the bench press. What I'm talking about is a tempo bench press. There are multiple ways that you can go about programming this, the tempo bench press. So the way that we structure it, it can be a 505, 303, or some sort of amalgamation of that, like a 323, where, so the first number is the tempo, how many internal count you have coming down. The middle number, whether it's 0, 1, 2, O means touch and go. It's the middle number is how long you're at the bottom of the movement. And then the third number is the concentric part of the movement. So it's eccentric, hold at the bottom, concentric. So down, at the bottom, up. So a 303 would be 3 count down, touch and go, 3 count up. A 515 would be a 5 count down, 1 count pause, 5 count up. This is a very masochistic way, or if you're doing this for yourself, a sadist. What's the difference between sadist and masochist? I know one's about the others and the other's about yourself. Either way, if you're programming this for someone and you hate them, good for you. If you hate yourself and you program it for yourself, also good for you. So let me show you what I mean. So the way you set up is exactly the same way you would set up for a regular bench press. You set your arch, set your feet, set your lats, set your knees. You take the bar. We're going to do a 303. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's do a 313. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, and a 505. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's how you do it. So while this is, it's in that gray area of, is this a mechanically similar movement or is it not? It is not competition standard, so it will be mechanically similar to a regular bench press. What the tempo bench press does is it almost gets an isometric in every single micro part, for lack of a better term, in the bench press. If you struggle with control issues on your bench press, if it's not a stabilization, but it's a control issue, where, for example, a lot of people, they'll get to a certain point and then they'll dive bomb their bench, where it's like the bottom third, bottom half of their bench, they lose tightness and they dive bomb their bench. If you lose tightness in your bench, that's a control issue that the tempo bench press will teach you how to alleviate, teach you how to get a better grasp of. If you have things where it's like you struggle under large volume, where you struggle with a lot of time under tension, if you're a slow bencher and you need to kind of push that time under tension limit for yourself, this is a good movement for that. Doing the 505s for sets of 3, that's at least 30 seconds of time under tension. But it's a very humbling movement to do because you're gonna wanna go very heavy because, oh, I'm only doing doubles or triples. It's not gonna be that hard. And then you burn yourself out in every single range of motion of the movement and you get very humbled very quickly. So how do you fit this into your programming? It fits in 2 spots. You're never going to replace your main movement with a tempo bench press. That would be stupid. You don't want to do too much tempo bench press because you don't want to develop a tempo within your bench press. That is bad. You want the entire mantra of powerlifting is be as powerful with the weight under control. So you want to be able to be as explosive as possible, but you want to be a controlled explosive. You want to be like when the Hulk finally figures out how to discuss and or not the Hulk, but Bruce Banner control the Hulk, control his anger and work with the Avengers to fight super villains and nerd stuff. What you want is this movement. It'll fit into your program two different ways. If you're warming up your bench and you want to get really good blood flow and you want a little bit of pre-fatigue, a little spice, a little razzle-dazzle in your bench press, in your program, you put it before your main movement. It gets blood flowing to everywhere that you want blood flowing for your bench press. That's a good thing, but you don't want to do too much of it. You want to be doing like a 3x2 or a 3x3 at probably somewhere between 75% and 90% of the working weight for the day. If you're doing singles, don't do that because your singles are going to be super high. So you want to, if you're doing singles, make it around like 60% for like a 3x2. Or you can do it after your main movement as a burnout, but you don't want to fail. You want to go as slow as possible. That's when you're going to want to use the 505. You want to use the 303, 313 pre-main movement work. If you do that, you're getting blood flowing and you're practicing the movement. But if you want to burn yourself out, you want to get the hypoxic response in all of the muscles that are used in the bench press, the stabilizers, the main movers, the pecs, the delts, the biceps, the triceps, the wee-wee. You're going to want to do it afterwards. You want to do a 505. You want to do something like 4x4, 505. So 4 sets of 4 reps, 505 at probably 75%. Probably 75% of whatever the weight for the main movement is. I was going to say or 90%, but you don't want to risk going to failure too much. And the amount of reps that you're doing in your main movement is going to adjust the way that you program this movement for yourself. So if you're doing something where it's like heavy doubles, you're not going to do 90% 4x4, 505. You're going to do like 75% 4x2, 3x2, 3x4, something like that, where you get a lot of repetition, you get a lot of time under tension. 4 reps of 505 is upwards of, if you think about it, 40 seconds under tension. And if you video yourself training a lot frequently and you're analyzing yourself, one of the things that you need to keep track of is your time under tension. If you're burning out, if you're doing an AMRAP set, if you're doing something where you're grinding something out, if you're looking at platform time, you need to look at your time under tension and you want to be able to push that a little further. Because if you have a grinder on the platform, if you take a long time, the judge in the chair decides, hey, I'm going to wait a really long time because I don't really think you're stable enough. You're not locked out entirely. So I'm going to be a dingus for a minute and have a little bit of an ego trip and not have you squat immediately. So we're going to wait at least like 5 seconds and go. Oh, okay. Or if you've got like a same thing on bench, your handoff person doesn't get out of the way, and the head judge doesn't like that. So they're not even going to tap your handoff guy. And you're like, oh, handoff guy is not getting out of the way, so I'm not going to give you the start command until your handoff person gets out of the way. And it's been a good 10 seconds. I'm not going to give you the start command, and your handoff person is just going to be on your shit list for the rest of your life. And then when you get down to the chest, the head judge is like, I don't know if that's stable enough. Let me have 3 more seconds of pause time. You're basically prepping yourself for the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario being, I mean, you don't want to say it's a head judge who's just on an ego trip, but a head judge that's on an ego trip where he says that he's a stickler about things, but he's not. He's just being a dick. So that's how you want to use the tempo bench press. It is a mechanically similar movement. It does a lot of really good, but what it does best is it prepares you for the worst case scenario, because you'd rather be prepared for the worst and get in the best case scenario then be prepared for the best case scenario and be put in the worst case scenario. We went over a whole lot today. We went over my 3 personal favorite mechanically similar movements. We went over what a mechanically similar movement is, how to utilize mechanically similar movements, these ones specifically in your bench programming, and how to do these mechanically similar movements to the best of your ability. So if you guys have any questions whatsoever, I'm responding to everyone because I have no life. Look at me. Do you think I'm doing a lot? No. I'm mostly just cuddling my dog and petting kitties and like drinking protein shakes. So comment, and whichever one of your homies is the worst in your group at bench press, send them this video and be like, hey, you suck at bench. We're doing this stuff to make you not suck at bench anymore, but we're also going to be doing them, so we're still going to be better than you, but you're not going to be outbenched by all the muscle mommies in our gym anymore, because that's embarrassing. All of us are getting outbenched by them, let's be honest. They get me going, these muscle mommies. Oh. Bringing a whole new definition to the word MILF. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe, send your girls' titties in my DMs. You're totally going to do that.